Hey y'all, it's Kim again. So this is about the Israeli nuclear program. It's called Kennedy-Dimona and the Nuclear Proliferation Problem from 1961 to 1962. This will be the second video for this. Let me get this thing out of here. Oh, I hate that when it pops up on the screen. It's like, just get out of the way. Okay, sorry. So let's get going. So President-elect John F. Kennedy and Secretary of State designate Dean Rusk meet with President Dwight D. Eisenhower and Secretary of State Christian Herter, 19th of January, 1961. At this meeting, Herter warned Kennedy about the Israeli nuclear problem. This is in the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library. I guess maybe that was at the top. But anyway, more than any other country, it was Israel which most impressed upon President Kennedy the complexity of nuclear proliferation. Israel was the first case with which he had to struggle as president. Only weeks before his inauguration, the outgoing Eisenhower administration quietly discovered and confirmed the secret reactor at Dimona. In mid-December, the news leaked out while the Eisenhower administration was pondering a special national intelligence estimate, which asserted that on the basis of the available evidence, plutonium production for weapons is at least one major purpose of this effort. According to the estimate, it was believed that Israel was acquiring a nuclear weapons capability. It would cause consternation in the Arab world, with blame going to the U.S. and France for facilitating the project. The U.S. Arab Republic, or Egypt and Syria, would feel the most threatened, might approach the Soviets for more countervailing military aid and political backing. And the Arab world in general might be prompted to take concrete actions against Western interests in the region. Moreover, Israel's initiative might remove some of the inhibitions to development of nuclear weapons in other free world countries. On January 19th, 1961, on the eve of his inauguration, President-elect Kennedy visited the White House for the last time as a guest, along with his senior team. After 45 minutes of one-on-one conversation with President Eisenhower, the two men walked to the cabinet room to join their departing and incoming secretaries of state, defense, and treasury to discuss the transition. One of Kennedy's first questions was about the countries which were most determined to seek the bomb: Israel and India. Secretary of State Christian Herter fired back and added that the newly discovered Dimona reactor, being constructed with aid from France, could be capable of generating 90 kilograms of weapons-grade plutonium by 1963. Herter urged the new president to press hard on inspection in the case of Israel before it introduced nuclear weapons into the Middle East. With this concern about stability in the Middle East and the broader nuclear proliferation threat, Kennedy took Herter's advice seriously. Within days, he met with departing Ambassador Reed for discussions of Dimona and other regional matters. To help him prepare for the meeting, new Secretary of State Dean Rusk provided an updated report about Israel's nuclear activities and a detailed chronology of the discovery of Dimona. For the rest of Kennedy's time in office, Dimona would remain an issue of special and personal concern to him and to his close advisors. The most important event covered in this collection was the nuclear summit held at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City on May 30th, 1961, between Kennedy and Ben-Gurion. We refer to it as a nuclear summit because Dimona was at the heart of that meeting. The encounter was made possible thanks to a reassuring report about the first American visit to Dimona, which had taken place 10 days earlier. Kennedy had tirelessly pressured Ben-Gurion to allow the visit since taking office, insisting that meeting the request made initially by Eisenhower administration after the discovery of Dimona was a condition for normalizing U.S.-Israeli relations. In a sense, Kennedy turned the question into a de facto ultimatum to Israel. For weeks, Ben-Gurion dragged his feet, possibly even manufacturing or at least magnifying a domestic political dispute into a government resignation, primarily as a ploy to stall or delay that Dimona visit. By April 1961, after a new government had been organized, Israeli Ambassador Avram Harman finally told the administration that Israel had agreed to an American tour of Dimona. On May 20th, two AEC scientists, U.M. Stabler and J.W. Crouch Jr., visited the nuclear facility on a carefully crafted tour. The visit began with a briefing by a Dimona senior management team headed by Director General Maines Pratt, who presented a technological rationale for and historic narrative of the project. The Dimona Nuclear Research Center, the Americans were told, was conceived as a means for gaining experience in construction of a nuclear facility, which would prepare them, or Israel, for nuclear power in the long run. In essence, according to Pratt, this was a peaceful project. As the American team's summary report, which was highlighted in a memorandum to National Security Advisor McGeorge Bundy, made very clear the AEC team believed that the Israelis had told them the truth. The scientists were satisfied that nothing was concealed from them and that the reactor is of a scope and peaceful character previously described to the United States by representatives of the government of Israel. The AEC's team's official report, document 8A, is now available for the first time. Previously, only draft notes written by the team's leader had been accessible to researchers. The difference between the two versions are minor, except for a noteworthy paragraph in the final report under the headline General Comment. That paragraph is important because it reveals that the Israeli host told the AEC team that the reactor's power was likely to double in the future. It is quite possible that after operating experience has been obtained, the power level of the reactor can be increased by a factor of the order of 2 by certain modifications in design and relaxation of some operating conditions. The AEC team should have seen that acknowledgement as a red flag, a worrisome indication that the reactor was capable of producing much more plutonium than was then acknowledged. But the team's one sentence response was benign. Design conservatism of this order is understandable for a project of this type. On the basis of such a positive report, the Waldorf Astoria meeting was able to go ahead. The Kennedy Ben-Gurion meeting. This collection includes both American and Israeli transcripts of the Waldorf Astoria meeting. One of the transcripts is a previously unknown draft of the Kennedy Ben-Gurion MEMCON, which has interesting differences with the final version. The U.S. official memorandum of conversation, I didn't know that's what that means, the MEMCON, but anyway, there you go, declassified and published in the 1990s, was prepared by Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern and South Asian Affairs Phillips Talbot and approved, possibly corrected by White House Deputy Special Counsel Mike Feldman. The Israeli minutes prepared by Ambassador Avraham Harman were also declassified in the 1990s, and historians have made excessive use of them. Ben-Gurion provided Kennedy with the rationale and narrative of the Dimona project that was very similar to what the Israeli host provided to the AEC team visiting Dimona, albeit in non technical and more political terms. The Dimona project was peaceful in nature. It was about energy and development. However, unlike during the Dimona visit, Ben-Gurion's narrative and rationale left a little wiggle room for a future reversal. The prime minister did that by qualifying his peaceful pledge and leaving room for a future change of heart. The Israeli transcript makes Ben-Gurion's caveat pronounced. For the time being, the only purpose are for peace, but we will see what will happen in the Middle East. It does not depend on us, italics added. The American transcript, by way of rephrasing Ben-Gurion, reveals a similar caveat as well. Our main and, for the time being, only purpose is this cheap energy, etc. The prime minister said, adding that we do not know what will happen in the future. Furthermore, commenting on the political and strategic implications of atomic power and weaponry, the prime minister said he does believe that in 10 or 15 years, the Egyptian presumably could achieve it themselves, and italics added. In his draft minutes, Assistant Secretary Talbot notes in parentheses that during that part of the conversation, Ben-Gurion spoke rapidly in a low voice so that some words were missed. Nevertheless, Talbot thought that he had heard Ben-Gurion making reference to a pilot plant for plutonium separation, which is needed for atomic power, but that might happen 3 or 4 years later, and that there is no intention to develop weapons capacity now. Talbot's draft was declassified long ago, but has been buried in obscurity. It needs to be taken into account by scholars. Notably, the Israeli transcript is even more straightforward in citing Ben-Gurion on the pilot plant issue. After 3 or 4 years, we shall have a pilot plant for separation, which is needed anyway for a power reactor. Days after the meeting, Talbot sat with Feldman at the White House to check fine points about sidelines of interest. There was the key issue of plutonium, about which Ben-Gurion mumbled quickly in a low voice. Ben-Gurion was understood to say something to the effect that the issue of plutonium would not arise until the installation was complete in 1964 or so, and only then could Israel decide what to do about processing it. But this appeared to be incompatible with what the prime minister had said to Ambassador Reid in Tel Aviv in January 1961, namely that the spent fuel would return to the country which provided the uranium in the first place, which was France. But Israeli Affairs Desk Officer William R. Crawford, who looked further into the record, suggested that what Ben-Gurion had said was more equivocal and evasive. Upon close examination, Ben-Gurion might have meant to hint in passing that Israel was preserving its freedom of action to produce plutonium for its own purposes. Kennedy may not have picked up on this point, but he, like Talbot, may not have been sure exactly what Ben-Gurion had said. Intelligence estimate. The most intriguing and novel document in this collection is National Intelligence Estimate 35 through 61, document number 11A, under the headline Outlook on Israel, which was declassified only in February 2015. The NIE left no doubt that the AEC's scientists' impression from their visit to Dimona had no impact on the way which the intelligence community made its own determination on Dimona's overall purpose. While the visit clearly helped to ease the political and diplomatic tensions between the United States and Israel over Dimona and removed, at least temporarily, the nuclear issue as a problem from the bilateral agenda, it did not change the opinion of U.S. intelligence professionals. In their view, while acknowledging the Israeli official narrative of Dimona as peaceful, it was truly about weapons capability. The Dimona complex provided Israel with the experience and resources to develop a plutonium production capability. NIE 35 to 61 reminded its readers that France had supplied plans, material, equipment, and technical assistance to the Israelis. Significantly, the intelligence community estimated in 1961 that Israel would be in a position to produce sufficient weapons grade plutonium for one or two crude weapons a year by 1965 to 66. Provided separation facilities with a capacity larger than that of the pilot plant now under construction are available. In retrospect, in all these respects, NIE 35 to 61 was accurate in its assessment and predictions, although no one on the U.S. side knew for sure when Israel would possess the requisite reprocessing facilities. The language about separation facilities raises important questions. If Israel was to produce nuclear weapons, it would require technology to reprocess spent fuel into plutonium. Whether and when U.S. intelligence knew that, Israel had begun work on a secret, dedicated separation plant larger than a pilot plant at the Dimona complex has yet to be disclosed, but if the CIA knew about such plans, it may have meant that key information was concealed from AEC scientists who visited Dimona, or perhaps they were instructed to locate such facilities. Probably lacking secret knowledge of intel, Israeli government thinking that authors of NIE 35 to 61 may not have fully understood the depth of Israel's nuclear resolve, or at least the modus operandi by which Israel proceeded with this nuclear project. They could not be fully clear, both conceptually and factually, on the nature of the Israeli nuclear commitment, i.e., whether Dimona was a dedicated weapons program from the very start, or alternatively, whether it was set up as infrastructure leading to a weapon capability upon a later decision. At a minimum, however, the authors of NIE 35 to 61 believed that the Israelis intend at least to put themselves in a position of being able to produce nuclear weapons fairly soon after a decision to do so. Notwithstanding the lack of clarity, the NIE's findings were incompatible with what Ben-Gurion told Kennedy about the overall purpose of the Dimona project, as well as what he had said about Dimona's plutonium production capability. Similarly, the NIE was inconsistent with the AEC report, whose writers accepted the Israeli narrative and rationale. The bottom line was that as early as 1961, the CIA already knew, or at least suspected, that the Israeli official account of the Dimona project, either by the Prime Minister or by Israeli scientists, was a cover story and deceptive by nature. So anyway, I think I'll stop it here and then we'll do another video on this, because there's so many documents attached to this, and this is the Wilson Center. They provide a lot of information. I've seen some stuff from there about the JFK stuff and the CIA stuff and other just documents have been declassified. But anyway, let me stop it here. I'll get another recorded and we'll just keep rolling. Anyway, see y'all later. Have a good day. Bye.